It all happened to my father one stormy night, in Glenwood, Colorado. It was the 80s. My father was an electrical engineer who was just returning home from the job site. He worked long hours, and it wasn't uncommon for him to be heading home around midnight to the small cabin he shared with a friend, tucked back in the canyon walls. It was pouring rain. Lightning flashed, only to illuminate the murky puddle patches of washed-out terrain. As my father rounded the corner upon the dirt road, he passed a large willow tree. As his headlights crossed his face, he noticed someone was crouched underneath it, and it was a woman, who seemed to be in her late 20s, with a long, blonde hair, quite tangled. She had on fairly casual clothes and carried a somewhat large bundle in her arms, wrapped in cloth. My father, being the gentleman that he was, decided to pull over and offered her to take shelter from the storm in his cabin that was just up the road. She smiled and thanked him as she got into the vehicle. She explained that she had been on a hike through the canyon that day when the storm had hit and had been caught off guard by the rain. My dad smiled and pointed out that she wasn't exactly wearing the best clothes or shoes to go on a hike. She laughed and said that she had left her place on a whim, unprepared. He asked if she needed him to dry anything at his place, pointing to the bundle she held tightly under her arm. Her voice suddenly got very stern and stated, "No." When my father asked her where she lived around here, things started to get strange. She started telling my dad that she had no family or friends in the area and was quite vague when asked details of where she lived. All she responded with was that it was too late to drive to tonight in this kind of weather. At this point, my dad said he felt that she was a bit off, but chalked it up to her exhaustion from hiking and standing out in the storm for several hours. As they entered the cabin, my dad remembered that his roommate had left that morning to take a trip out of town and wouldn't be back for several days. My dad would have offered her his friend's room, but didn't feel comfortable doing so without her permission. Remember, this was the 80s, so pocket cell phones weren't on everyone yet. My dad told her that she was welcome to sleep on the couch and dry off as he handed her several towels. She took them from him with her right hand, but still never let go of that bundle she hugged under her left arm. My dad at this point realised that she had never given him her name, so he introduced himself. "Nice to meet you," she replied. "My name is Mary Lou." My father started to feel a bit more comfortable and turned on the television for her and handed over the remote. She scanned through the channels, finally deciding on a gangster flick. The scene involved a bunch of mobsters getting shot to pieces. Mary found this to be quite amusing and started to laugh in a high-pitched, crackling tone. My dad started to get a bit creeped out by this. She was enjoying it a little bit too much, he said. Then my dad asked her about her life, and things took a turn for the worse. When asked if she was in a relationship, she pointed down at her belt buckle and told my dad the story of her breakup. She claimed her last boyfriend wanted to be domineering over her, and to this she responded by bludgeoning him half to death in his gravel driveway with her belt buckle, the same one that she was wearing. He kept saying, "Stop, please stop," and begging, but I wouldn't show him mercy, she said, with a note of pride in her voice. My dad asked if he had abused her, or if she had reacted in self-defense, and she merely scoffed and said, "No, otherwise he would have been dead." My father's unease grew as the conversations progressed. She told him about her mother dying on the operating table and how the surgeon who had been working on her walked out covered in blood and said that she would be fine. How was she supposed to be okay with all of her guts in the trash can? She spewed, laughing as she glanced back at the TV screen, littered with dishevelled, bullet-riddled corpses. I love the sight of blood. It excites me. Turns me on, you know. Death. Draining them to death. At this point, my dad was officially done. He was bigger and stronger than she was. He was quite streetwise and had seen plenty of horrors himself. But the way she spoke with a violent confidence combined with her sure grip upon the bundle, which lay under her arm, sent chills down his spine, and he needed a plan. Finally, an idea popped into my father's head. I have a friend who is a priest in town, and he has access to several shelters funded by the church. You would be a lot more comfortable there instead of on our couch. They can feed you too, and arrange a ride for you to get home in the morning. I can call him right now. He's only a few miles away from here, he stated reassuringly. Mary Lou's tone brightened to match his. That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much. My father smiled, hiding his relief. Of course, it's the least I could do for you. As my dad walked over to the phone and began to dial the second number, Mary Lou erupted in a low, guttural growl. I hate priests. I hate priests. She didn't yell it. She didn't scream it. She said it with a tired hatred, a clear, direct, audible disdain from the bottom of her heart with an unflinching resolve. And my dad had had enough. This wasn't a game to play anymore. This was beyond a stranger with odd tendencies. A darkness with coiled cruelty had crossed the threshold of his door. You need to leave, and you need to leave now, my dad said, pointing to the front of the cabin. There's the door. I can't have you in here and feel comfortable. I'm sorry, but the storm has stopped, and I hate to have you walk in the dark, but that's just the way this has to go. Please leave. Mary Lou gazed upon him, expressionless, and finally just shrugged. My father walked her out, standing close to her in the event that the small bundle concealed some type of weapon. He wasn't taking any further chances. She smiled at him as she slowly walked out onto the front porch. Goodbye for now. See you when I see you, she said calmly. With that, she walked down the long dirt road with a single streetlight upon its path. She looked back one last time before crossing the light and disappearing, enveloped by the darkness with no trace of her to be seen. My dad called the police the next day, concerned that she may be hiding on his premises somewhere, after speaking to his girlfriend, now my mum, about it and being convinced by her that she was going to cut the window screen when he was gone and hide in the house and then kill him. They found nothing, but said that the area attracted a lot of nomads and transients. My father then made the mistake of telling his engineer buddies at work, which resulted in them bidding him farewell at the end of each shift in the form of asking that he say hi to Mary Lou for them. My dad never saw her again. He still questions what could have been in that bundle that she adamantly protected. He'll never know. I am 22 years old and I live in Toronto, Canada, in a nice suburban area. When I was around 18 years old, I had a house party at the same house that I am still living in now. My parents went to our cottage to spend the weekend and it was a beautiful summer evening. There were around 25, maybe more people at this party. We were all drinking and being obnoxious teenagers as expected. At around 12 AM, the police showed up. I'm sure it had a lot to do with the fact that me and my ex were in the driveway having a screaming war. Luckily, the officers didn't ask anything about alcohol or anything like that. Just told everyone who was not spending the night to leave, and if they come back there would be a problem. After the cops and the majority of the guests finally left, I told everyone to keep the party inside because I didn't want it too loud outside. I decided I needed some fresh air and some time to myself after the events of the night. I went out into my backyard and sat on the patio chair, leaning my head against a wooden fence behind me, and then I began to doze off. While I was snoozing, my two friends thought it would be a good idea to sneak up on me and scare the crap out of me. So they did, and I let out a huge scream. I'm not sure how long I'd been sleeping for, it couldn't have been that long. About 20 seconds after my scream, we heard another scream come from somewhere else. It was almost like a delayed echo. It was the scream of a female for sure, and it sounded like it was coming from down the street. We started walking towards that part of the backyard that had a chain link fence so that we could see down the road and down my street. It was very dark, probably about 1:30 now, and the street was very dimly lit with street lights. I was just about to say it must have been someone walking by and they wanted to be funny or something, when one of my friends pointed out a girl standing about 20 feet away at the end of someone's driveway, just staring at us. She was wearing a short black dress, had long dark hair, and her skin was really pale. It almost seemed to glow in the dark. I suggested that it looked a lot like our friend Laura, who the last time I saw was extremely intoxicated. I thought maybe she'd got out of the house and was trying to mess around with us. One of my friends volunteered to go inside and look for Laura, while me and my other friend stayed in the backyard trying to figure out who this girl was. I screamed again to see if it would get the same response, and I did. She screamed back almost immediately. I then called out, "Laura?" and she responded with, "Yeah." My friend and I decided that we needed to approach her and try and get her back into the house safely before the cops came back and we all got into serious trouble. We got about halfway to this girl, and she still stood there like she was made from stone. She didn't move. She didn't even make a noise. Just stood there, staring at us. I began to think to myself, this can't be Laura, because if it was, she wouldn't just be standing there like she was. We still couldn't make out the face, and then the next thing I know, I hear my friend who went inside calling out for us. "Laura is inside, passed out." Those words hit me like a ton of bricks, and I froze. All of a sudden, this mystery girl starts cackling so loud that my friend and I both jumped, and I mean, she was laughing so loud, it was unbelievable. She then turned around and ran up the driveway towards the back of the house, continuing with this crazy, scary laughing. When she was finally out of sight, I could still hear her laughing, like she was just 10 feet away from us still. We turned around and started power walking back to the house, when we were suddenly startled with this loud banging sound that almost sounded like the metal garbage cans smashing together. This girl really creeped me out, so I went inside, locked all the windows and doors, and hid under my covers. To this day, I still have no idea who she was. What young girl in their right mind would just stand there by herself when two strangers are approaching her? One of the strangers being 6'2" and 210 pounds. She was either really brave, or just wanted to have some fun with us. My friends had suggested that maybe this girl was drunk, or on some serious drugs, or she was something else, and that just creeps me right out to think about. The weirdest event about the story is that the next day, I saw the man who lives at the house where the girl was standing, and I asked him if he heard or saw anything out of the ordinary between 1 and 2 AM, and he said he heard nothing. It seems almost impossible that she was so close to his house, and was so loud, but he didn't hear anything. What do you guys think? The summer after I moved in with my boyfriend, I was sleeping in late on a random Tuesday. I had the window open because it was July and warm, and my boyfriend had gone to work a few hours before. I was woken by the doorbell ringing, which scares the shit out of me because it's so loud. I didn't think anything of it until it rang for a second time. So grumbling, I pulled some clothes on and went to look out the peephole. When I didn't see anything, I gave up on sleeping and decided to hop into the shower. It was probably about noon or so. When I got out from the shower, I went to go open the sliding glass door that leads to the concrete slab that serves as our patio. We had never used that door because we have cats and keeping it closed was imperative. So it was extremely odd that when I opened up the glass door, I noticed that the screen door was open about 6 inches. I promptly shut the screen door and opted to spend the day in the heat. My boyfriend got out of work at 4, like he did every day. I was sitting on the computer which faces the parking lot, and normally would have had the window next to me open, but since I was freaked out that day, I had closed everything up. Had I left the window open, I would have heard him pull into the parking lot and have a conversation with someone. His ex-girlfriend had shown up at the exact moment he came home. The really creepy part, she tried to invite herself in, and when he told her no, she just started rambling about how it was because there was another girl living there, and how she just knew he was seeing someone else, and that it was so wrong that I was living with him, and all this bullshit. I hadn't answered the door, I hadn't done anything all day but wake up, take a shower and sit on the computer. All in an area with window blinds. But if you were to get really, really close to the bedroom window, you can kind of see through the blinds. I'm pretty convinced that she was snooping around the apartment that day. It was my 18th birthday, and as a newly minted adult, I was enjoying my grown-upness by getting as drunk as I could. I'm with my friends in this pub in town, and we're gathered around a table. There's maybe 6 of us. A couple of tables over, there's a group of girls, and there's maybe 6 of them. One of them catches my eye when I look over, and she's stunning. Long red hair, bright blue eyes, full pink lips. I look away and carry on drinking, but she keeps catching my eye again and again. We do that thing where you both catch each other looking, then pretend you weren't looking at all, whilst doing even more. Eventually, I need another drink, so I get up and head to the bar, and I notice her doing the same thing. At this point, I notice her body. She's short, but with a great figure. Breasts that are good and big and round, small waist, wide hips, great bum, everything. I'm pretty much fully in lust with this girl, and we've not even met. We get to the bar, and I let her order before me. She gets something like a lemonade, unusual for that pub. but I figured someone's got to be the designated driver, and it's probably her. I order a pint for myself, turn round to head back, and she's there, right behind me. We get to chatting, and she tells me her name's Helena. I make some kind of Shakespeare joke, she laughs, and I'm in. The rest of the night I talk mostly to her, though it's cool, because the other lads have descended on the group of girls at the other table. The evening wears on, and eventually, we get to the, well, are we going to fuck or just agree to meet each other again, or fuck off and pretend this never happened stage. We go for the former, we go back to my place, being very careful not to wake my parents because I'm still shit and live at home, and have a great night. Long story short, we ended up going out for a while, always meeting out somewhere, then heading back to mine. Eventually we drift into actually being a couple, and from there we start to do more coupley things. And that's when the crazy leaks in. She starts arguing with me about every little thing imaginable, from not saying hello in the right way, to not being there to wake her up at precisely 6:01:09 in the morning, or whatever. Every argument escalates into whatever the fuck she's decided to rant about, and always ends in the same way. She threatens to dump me, I coax her back, we kiss, fuck, everyone's happy. After maybe a month and a half of this or so, I get bored of it all. I do the decent thing and take her out for coffee to a cosy little cafe, tell her in the best way that I can that we're not working out, and it's all pretty surprisingly amicable. Except it's not. The phone calls start. Always from a private number, always of crying. At first to my mobile, then to my home phone, always a private number, always crying. I know she's faking it, because if I never answered the phone, my parents would have, and would have a little friendly chat, then they would hand the phone to me, and immediately it's like a Niagara Fall of fucking tears. Then the emails, weird ranty emails with gibberish and threats and pleading to take me back. Hundreds of them. There'd be days when they'd come literally every 5 minutes, days when there'd be nothing at all. I changed my number to get rid of her, got a whole new mobile number, and we went X-directory with our new number. Changed my email too. I still got them for about 6 months after, but eventually they stopped. And that should have been the end of it. Little did I know. I started going online, on various forums and games, etc. On one such forum, I struck up a friendship with a girl on there. I know she was a girl because she showed me pictures of herself with little scribbled, "Hi OFAB, I'm random username," on whatever, which is pretty conclusive. As evidence goes, we had a great time chatting and whatever, and we had so much in common, it was completely insane. Like, not only did she like the same things I did, but she was this utterly stunning little brunette, like a proper English rose type. Anyway, eventually we started going out, having little Skype chats, though she never went on cam, which I was cool with, because I looked like shit a lot of the time anyway. Things started out well, but over time she got a bit too clingy for my liking. She'd ask me where I'd been if I was a minute late, or got jealous if she'd seen a picture of me on Facebook with another girl. She got upset at the slightest thing, or angry if I mentioned another girl's name, even if it was, "Oh, Louise said she liked my work," when Louise was the lecturer of my course. Eventually I got pissed off, dumped her, and we had a nice clean break. I avoided those forums, changed my Skype, because remember, I've had bad times with the previous ex and communication stuff, and that was that. Not learning my lesson at all, I went on different forums, found another girl, and got to know her. This one was a tanned blonde, all boobs and legs and sexy as fuck Australian accent. She liked most of the same things I did, with enough difference that we could teach each other how to do things, how to appreciate things, how to like things. She was laid back, and compared to my latest ex, she was a breath of fresh air. If I got on Skype half an hour later than I said I'd be, she was cool with it. If I spent a conversation talking about my lecturer, using her name every dozen of words, she'd pitch along with me, making me laugh, making me smile, making me love. Eventually, I talked of meeting her, though it was a long way from England to Sydney, and expensive as anything. I was willing to fly to meet her, because I wanted to see her face to face, to see the places she'd told me about, to go to the clubs and the bars and the restaurants she'd told me about. I wanted to hold her in my arms and kiss her and actually have a proper girlfriend again. She immediately broke up with me, saying I'd only be disappointed with the reality. Then came the latest girl. She was Canadian, brunette, something of a rock chick, completely different to my usual kind of girl. We met on some chat site when I was bored and got talking and swapped details. She introduced me to a ton of new music I'd never even considered listening to, and I did the same for her. If I complained about something, she told me to man the fuck up. If I turned up late, she told me it was fine because time is something the man makes us believe in. She was the coolest fucking girl I'd ever known. Again, we dated on Skype or whatever, and again, we talked about meeting up, and again, she broke up with me, saying that it had all just been in fun or whatever. It was cool, it was amicable and fine, and that was that. All this happened over a couple of years, with me being with each girl anywhere between 4 and 6 months, and my times between being maybe 1 or 3 months. I was a quick worker and fuck the rebound shit. Anyway, I came back to my hometown for the holiday. I think it was Reading Week or something, and fuck being on campus then. I was wandering along the road when, who should I see but Psycho Girl? Rather than avoiding her, I carried on walking. She came up to me, said she had something to tell me and we needed to talk desperately. I made all kinds of excuses, but each one she batted aside until she wore me down. We went to the pub and she told me something that basically terrified me. She hadn't wanted to give up on me, so she'd used what she knew of me to find places I'd go online. She'd made different accounts, lots of different accounts, in the hopes that she'd find me so she could talk to me and try and win me back. Except she'd made fake accounts, so I wouldn't immediately ignore her. See where this is going? Yep. Every one of those girls I'd dated had been her, using pictures of friends, using fake accents, pretending to not know the things that she knew. She'd followed me across at least a dozen different websites, stalked me across hundreds of posts and threads, and all the time had made me believe I was talking to completely different people. I didn't date anyone for a couple of years after that. I don't know what came of her after that. She sort of disappeared from my life and I haven't seen her since. I went out briefly with a couple of other girls, but only ones I'd met face to face, who didn't look anything like her at all. I don't know if she still follows me about online. I once had an ongoing elusive food poisoning that lasted for days, and towards the end of its cycle, I went for a lengthy walk on the beach near my home in the desperate hope that I could get some fresh air without shitting myself in front of the town's nightlife. That night I met a group of girls who were obviously drunk and crowding around one of their cars. They wolf whistled as I passed the car, and to my surprise, I ended up hitting it off pretty well with one of the girls, Alyssa. We exchanged numbers and I went home proud of my achievement. That night I started getting a flourish of random texts from her, telling me how hot I looked and that I seemed to be boyfriend material. I told her that I was interested too, and that we'd have to meet up again sometime soon. This was back in the day that I was a poor student studying in Australia, so I arranged to meet her the following weekend after I'd knocked over my study commitments. She was reluctant to wait that long, and over the course of the week she texted me endlessly, increasingly more desperate ploys to see me earlier. I remember one day on lunch, my uni friends and I actually counted the amounts of text I had received from her so far that day. It was around 90. They were a mix of generic things like, miss you, to, come to mind now, I want to see your sexy face, now. I hardly responded to any of them. If she was lucky, maybe 1 in 20. Irrelevant text. Now, being a 20-something-year-old male, my obvious apprehension regarding Alyssa was mixed with a very primal, groin-stirring curiosity. So, yeah. She was so needy, so pushy. Would she be wild in the sack? Would this balance out and make a fun, feisty girlfriend? So I followed through with our original plans, and I met her that weekend. I picked her up and we saw a movie at the cinema. After not too long, I observed that her text message demeanour didn't quite match her face-to-face personality at all. She was timid, quiet, a little quizzical, but nothing like the love-hungry, horny, pushy, crazy girl that I just spent the week fighting myself over. I was beginning to ease up after the movie. Something just clicked. She was just a bit bland for me. I decided that she wasn't for me, and that I was cool with that. She made small chit-chat, but wasn't overbearing or energy-draining like I'd expected. So I took her back to my place and we put on a horror flick. Nothing happened throughout the whole movie. No hand-touching, no kissing, no moving closer, or bed wrestling. I had decided that I must have been somehow thrown in the friend zone, so I took her back to her place. We were idle out the front of her house at maybe 11:30, and I told her it was fun hanging out and that we might do it again sometime. I considered the date a failure and was just keen to get out of there. She opens the door to leave, and suddenly turns around and lunges on me, practically eating my face, sucking my lips, beating me up through my jeans. I stopped her. After a little while, obviously I was prepared to give it a shot, but it just felt weird. So she was noticeably hurt and slammed the door, so I drove away. By the time I reached my place, I received a number of texts, a chain of insults that ranged from whatever, I don't want you anyway, to fuck you, asshole. I replied diplomatically once or twice, to be shut down by another hail of ill-prepared insults. These texts continued for days, and even, well, after I'd stopped texting back, I'd received the occasional asshole out of the blue. My friends thought it was hilarious. I had a friend claim to me that he thought we were dating all through college, helping each other with homework, hanging out with mutual friends. I was literally married to my current husband the last few months, and stalker guy didn't break it to me that he thought I was just hardcore friend-zoning him until graduation. I told him from the damn get-go that I wasn't attracted to him. Last I knew, he joined the military because my husband was in the military. He's probably reading this right now, so I'd like to emphasise to him that sometimes people are just nice to each other, and just because I was a woman who was friendly with a man, I never ever owed him anything more than that. And that is the story of why I never made friends with a man again. Oh, and also of why I vomit a little each time I hear the term friend zone. When my ex and I moved in together, things didn't last long. Because she paid no rent on the super nice apartment we moved into, I kicked her out. Things were not exactly cordial between the two of us, and she refused to give me back the key to the apartment that was in her possession. I guess one night, someone in the main house that my apartment was behind had a car parked in my driveway. Turns out, she thought I had a girl over, and she had the key, so she figured, hey, what the hell, I'll pay them a surprise visit. Problem was, it was about 8 in the morning while she was on her way to class, which was near my house, but it was not reasonable for her to be driving past my house to get there. So she came bursting into my apartment at 8 in the morning after I had worked an 8-hour overnight shift at a bar. I was delirious with sleep, but I woke up to the sound of my front door slamming open and someone stomping up the stairs to my room. I had no idea what time it was. My room was blacked out. So I did the only logical thing you do when you hear someone crashing through your house in a very audibly apparent rage. You go for the gun in the nightstand. I almost shot my ex-girlfriend in the stomach with a .40 because she decided to pay me an unannounced visit early in the morning, after I'd gotten off a very long and tiring shift. Another time I did have a girl over, she did the exact same thing. Stopped by, saw someone's car in the driveway, and at this point I'd already gotten the key back from her. So she did what any sane person would do and stood outside my door, calling me repeatedly. I had to threaten to call the police to get her to leave. It was super awkward for the girl that stayed that night. Fuck, it was super awkward for me. So back in the 1970s, my mum was a teenager living in Houston. She and her 9 siblings lived in the Heights, which she says is a nice neighbourhood now, but at the time was something of a slum. Her family was super poor. Anyway, my mum had a crush on one of her brother's friends. She was around 14 or 15 at the time, and he was a few years older. But she was in love. His name was Mark. Well, around this time, boys started disappearing from the neighbourhood. They weren't leaving notes or telling anyone that they were leaving. The families were calling the police, but the police weren't doing anything about it. They decided that the boys had run away and never really looked into it any further. After all, these were poor kids living in a bad neighbourhood. They ran away all the time. Life goes on. One day, Mark disappears too. Meanwhile, my mum's brother was hitching a ride out to the beach to go fishing. He did this on a regular basis and would bum a ride from anyone. On the way to the beach, the guy driving the car stops to fill up the gas tank. The guy working at the gas station, Mum says they called him Weird Larry, sees my uncle and asks who he's with. My uncle replies that he doesn't actually know the guy. Larry won't let my uncle go any further and makes him get out of the car. The driver goes on without him. Now then, 3 years have passed since the boys started disappearing, and they finally find out what happened. A man had been paying 2 boys to lure teenage boys to his house, where he drugged them, strapped them to a wooden board, tortured them, raped them, and then killed them. There were at least 28 victims, and Mark Scott was one of them. The only reason they found out was because the 2 teenagers murdered the serial killer, then told the police all about the murders and led them to some of the bodies. And guess who picked up my uncle that day when he was going fishing? About 10 years ago, I was recently divorced and living alone in a 1-bedroom apartment. The place was clean and the rent was decent. One of those places that had a doorman. I felt safe here. I was alone and loving it, focused on my career and not on my clingy ex-husband. Things were finally looking up for me. At the time, I was working pretty late at the office and would often stumble into my apartment, sleep-deprived, in the early hours of the morning and wake up by 6:30, 7-ish to start the day. I started noticing that in the morning my door would be unlocked sometimes. I usually dismissed this as my sleep-dead brain, thinking that the bed was more appealing than locking the door. Another thing that I noticed since moving in was that I seemed to misplace things more than I used to. Little things like a hairbrush or nail polish, that sort of thing. It wasn't really that big of a deal, just enough to be a slight annoyance to my day. The longer I lived there, the more frequently I seemed to forget to lock the door. At first it was every once in a while, then it seemed like an almost daily occurrence. More things went missing. Things like pictures, shaving razors, more disturbingly, my underwear. This went on for long enough, then I started to get a little paranoid. I started to take the time at night to make sure the door was locked. I got into the habit of every night after I locked the door to turn the handle 3 times and say to myself, it's locked, it's locked, it's locked. Time after time, I would wake up and the door would be unlocked. One time I even tried staying up all night to watch my door, but I ended up falling asleep in the chair. I decided that my mind was not reliable enough to stay up all night, so I invested in a video camera. I went all out and bought the fanciest camera that I could get my hands on. So one night, I set the camera up facing the door. I hid the camera under a pile of towels on the floor. I locked the door and went to bed. When I woke up, my apartment looked normal, nothing missing that I could see. I decided to check the tape. I fast-forwarded through the hours of the footage, not seeing anything. I was just about to give up when I noticed the handle of the door jitter. Then, it slowly crept open. A figure slid through the half-open door and walked towards the camera. It paused, looked around as if it was listening for something, then walked forward into the direct view of the camera. I paused the camera. The hairs on my arms and the back of my neck started to rise. I was staring directly into the face of the maintenance man of the building. I could see those big, thick glasses and curly hair. I had no doubt who it was. I played the tape a little more. He looked quite comfortable as he walked around the apartment. Then he turned and walked towards my bedroom and out of view of the camera. I didn't know what to do. Sobbing, I called the police. I tried to explain over the phone, but I couldn't. Soon enough, 2 officers arrived on my doorstep. I told them everything and showed them the tape. I remember seeing the blood drain from their faces. They promised me that I was safe and that they were going to get this guy. I needed to lay down, but I didn't want to be alone. One of the officers offered to stand outside my apartment door as I took a nap. As I was laying down in my bed, unable to sleep but too drained to move, something kept nagging at me. I laid there for a few more minutes, tossing and turning, unable to get comfortable or rest. My mind began racing. Then a realization slowly washed over me and chilled me to the bone. We watched the tape. and saw the man enter my home, but we never saw him leave. I froze, then started shaking. I needed to get to the front door. I sat up and looked around the room. I couldn't see anyone. I swung my legs over the side of the bed cautiously. My feet hit the cold wood floor, and I felt warm breath on my ankles. I raced out of the apartment as fast as I could and to the safety of the police officer. He called for backup. They found the man under my bed, clutching a knife and a Polaroid camera.